When the land that holds generations of history is threatened by powerful forces, a blind man and his loyal companion face an invisible enemy, revealing secrets no one could have imagined. The sunrise in Colorado had a special aroma, thought William Thompson, or simply Will as everyone knew him. Even though he couldn't see the light flooding the mountains, he felt the warmth of the first rays touching his wrinkled face after 50 years of life. With hands calloused from hard work, Will patted the head of Max, his loyal German shepherd, while sipping freshly brewed coffee on the porch of his modest home. "Let's go, buddy. We've got a lot of work ahead," he said, rising from the rocking chair he'd inherited from his father. Since childhood, when a rare illness stole his sight, Will had learned to see the world differently. What he lacked in vision, he made up for in sensitivity. He could tell the exact moment the cheese was perfectly aged just by touch and smell. He knew when rain was coming hours in advance by the restless behavior of the cows. And most importantly, he knew every inch of Hope Ranch as if he could picture it all in his mind. "Max, the cows seem restless today," he remarked, noticing the subtle shift in the ground's vibration as he walked through the pasture. The dog barked in response, as if confirming the observation. Life on the ranch was simple, but filled with small rituals. In the morning, Will tended to the animals and checked the milk production. Then, he dedicated himself to crafting the artisanal cheeses that were his main source of income. In the afternoon, with Max's help, he walked the property's boundaries, checking fences and water troughs. That Saturday, however, would be different. It was market day in the nearby town, 10 kilometers away, and Will always took the opportunity to sell his products and catch up with the locals. "Good morning. Mr. Will, did you bring those cheeses Mrs. Eleanor ordered?" asked Tony, the driver of the only bus that traveled the dirt road near the ranch. "Sure did, Tony, and some extra things I picked from the garden yesterday," he replied, adjusting the baskets on the bus seat. The vehicle rattled along the bumpy road, but Will was used to it. He sensed the presence of other passengers by their distinct scents and familiar voices. Max lay at his feet, alert as always. The town market was small but lively. The smell of food, the hum of conversations, and the music blaring from the speakers created a welcoming atmosphere. Will settled into his usual spot with Tony's help, and soon the customers began to arrive. "Mr. Will, these cheeses seem better every day." "What's your secret?" asked Mrs. Irene, a loyal customer. "No secret at all, Mrs. Irene, just love for what you do," he replied, smiling as he weighed her order. That's when Max, usually calm in that setting, began to growl softly. Will immediately sensed something was off. Years of living with the animal had taught him to trust those signs. "What is it, Max? Who's there?" he whispered, leaning toward the dog. Max's growl grew louder. Will sharpened his other senses and caught a strange scent, too strong for the simple atmosphere of the market. An expensive cologne mixed with the smell of pressed clothes and new leather. Someone was approaching. "Excuse me, are you William Thompson from Hope Ranch?" The voice was deep, polite, but with a tone that didn't match the simplicity of the place. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" "Michael Newman, pleased to meet you. I'm a businessman, and I'm interested in seeing your property. I've heard great things about your products." Will extended his hand, which was gripped firmly. Something about the man's touch unsettled him. It was as if there was an unspoken intention, an energy that made him uneasy. Max kept growling under his breath. "My ranch is small, Mr. Newman. Nothing that might interest a businessman, I imagine." "Ah, but you'd be surprised by what interests me," replied Michael, with a slight tone of irony in his voice. "I'd like to visit you one of these days, if it's not too much trouble." "Of course, Hope Ranch is always open," Will answered, more out of politeness than genuine desire. As he finished his sales and returned home in the late afternoon, Will couldn't shake the strange encounter from his mind. There was something in the air, a feeling that the peace of Hope Ranch was about to be disturbed. Max by his side seemed to share the same unease. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from, and we'll continue. The days following the fair were marked by strange occurrences at Hope Ranch. Will, with his sharp perception, was the first to notice something wasn't right. On Monday, When he went to look for his shovel to work in the garden, he realized the tool wasn't in its usual place. "Max, have you seen my shovel?" he asked the dog, laughing at himself immediately after. It was a habit he'd had forever, talking to Max as if the animal could respond with words. After searching every corner of the tool shed, Will finally found the shovel tossed on the ground near the fence. It looked like it had been used and then carelessly abandoned, something he would never do. By Wednesday, things got even. Stranger. While inspecting the property fence, Will ran his fingers over the wood and felt fresh carvings. Someone had made marks on the fence, as if mapping the boundaries of his land. "What do you make of this, Max?" he asked, sensing the dog's restlessness beside him. Max barked once and ran to the other side of the fence, sniffing intently. He returned minutes later, agitated, as if trying to communicate something important. Will stroked the dog's fur, trying to calm him. "Easy, boy, we'll figure out what's going on here." The next morning, during his breakfast coffee, Will heard the engine of a car approaching on the dirt road. It was unusual. Few people had any reason to visit such a remote place. Max began barking fiercely, running toward the entrance of the property. The firm footsteps approaching the porch confirmed Will's suspicion. This was no ordinary visit. "Good morning, Mr. William Thompson." The voice was the same as at the market, now even more confident. "Michael Newman, remember me?" "Of course, Mr. Newman. What brings you to my humble property?" Will heard a second set of footsteps, lighter, and the rustling of papers. "This is my assistant, Richard," Michael introduced. "We've brought a proposal I believe will interest you greatly." Max wouldn't stop growling even when Will tried to calm him with a pat on the head. "Please come in," the farmer invited, more out of politeness than desire. "Can I offer you some coffee?" Leading the visitors into the simple living room, Will felt the air thick with tension. The scent of Michael's expensive cologne overpowered the natural aroma of wood and fresh coffee. "Mr. Thompson, I'll get straight to the point," Michael began, as Richard opened the document folder. "Our company is interested in acquiring properties in this region for a major development project." Will listened carefully as Michael explained rising property values, progress, and opportunities. The words sounded hollow, lacking the connection to the land that was so fundamental to him. "And we're willing to offer a price well above market value for your property," the businessman concluded, with the tone of someone closing a big deal. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Max's panting breath, the dog remaining alert at his owner's side. "Mr. Newman, I appreciate the interest, but Hope Ranch is not for sale," Will replied, his voice firm. Michael let out a short laugh as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. "Mr. Thompson, perhaps you didn't grasp the amount we're offering. It's a sum that could secure your future, let you live comfortably anywhere you'd like." Will stood, signaling the conversation was over. "It's not a matter of value, Mr. Newman. This land is my life, my history. It's not for sale at any price." There was a moment of palpable tension. Will could feel the irritation emanating from Michael, whose fingers were drumming nervously on the table. "Well, I'm sorry to hear that," the businessman finally said, standing up as well, "but I'd like you to reconsider. We'll leave the proposal with you. Think it over carefully." Richard placed some papers on the table, and both men headed for the exit. Before leaving, Michael turned back one last time. "Oh, and Mr. Thompson, in these parts, all the other properties have already accepted our offers. You'll be the only one left behind when progress comes." The veiled threat didn't go unnoticed. Will remained impassive until he heard the car engine fading into the distance. Only then did he let his shoulders slump, feeling the weight of the situation. Max approached, nuzzling his hand as if offering comfort. "Don't worry, buddy, they won't take our home," he murmured, petting the dog. "But we need to stay alert. I have a feeling this is just the beginning." That night, lying in bed, Will reflected on what was happening. Why so much interest in his small ranch? There was something more to this story, something he still couldn't fully grasp. Sleep was slow to come. And when he finally drifted off, it was with Max keeping watch at the foot of the bed, as if both knew difficult days lay ahead. Saturday morning dawned with an unusual breeze. Will woke earlier than usual, restless after a night of fitful sleep. Max, who normally slept peacefully at the foot of the bed, had spent the night shifting around and barking softly, as if sensing something. "What is it, boy? You feel it too?" asked Will, running his hand over the dog's fur as he stood up. After breakfast, Will decided to do something he hadn't done in weeks: inspect every corner of the property. With Max as his guide, he first headed to the stable, where the cows seemed more restless than usual. Next, he checked the shed where he kept his tools, and to his surprise, found that several were out of place or simply missing. "Someone's been here, Max, and it wasn't a friendly visit," he murmured, feeling a growing sense of vulnerability. Continuing his inspection, he made his way to the far edge of the ranch, near the border with the neighboring property, which, according to Michael Newman, had already been sold. There, Will noticed something strange beneath his feet. Crouching down, his skilled fingers traced marks in the soil that didn't belong to any of the local wildlife, or even Max. They were human footprints, fresh. "Someone walked through here. Last night, Max," he said, and the dog barked as if in confirmation. It was then, as he followed the fence line, that Will heard an almost imperceptible sound, a faint whimper, like muffled crying. Max immediately bolted toward the noise, barking differently, not in alarm or aggression, but with something between curiosity and concern. "What did you find, boy?" Will asked, carefully following the dog. His foot brushed against something that shouldn't have been there: torn cardboard boxes. Crouching again, Will explored the area with his hands and felt something soft, warm, and trembling. A puppy, thin and weak, barely able to move. "Who would do something like this?" he muttered angrily, gently picking up the small animal. "Leave a puppy to suffer like this?" The puppy, which appeared to be the same breed as Max, a German shepherd, shivered and weakly licked Will's hand. Surprisingly, Max showed no jealousy. Instead, he sniffed the puppy carefully, as if understanding the situation. "Let's get you home, little one. You need food and care," Will said, tucking the puppy into his coat. Back at the house, Will prepared a makeshift bed with old blankets and placed the puppy near the wood stove to warm up. He offered warm milk in a shallow dish, which the animal drank eagerly despite its weakness. "You were abandoned, weren't you? Well, here at Hope Ranch, we take in the abandoned too," he remarked, remembering how he had found Max years ago under similar circumstances, though Max was already an adult at the time. In the hours that followed, Will devoted himself to caring for the puppy. He applied an herbal ointment to the small wounds on the animal's body, a homemade remedy he had learned from his grandfather. Max, meanwhile, stayed close by, watching every move intently. "We need to give him a name, Max. What do you think?" asked Will as he stroked the little animal, now sleeping peacefully. After a moment of thought, he decided, "Let's call him Brave, because it takes a lot of bravery to survive what he's been through." As the day went on, Will noticed that Brave responded well to the care. The puppy began to show more energy, though he was still weak. Max, overcoming his initial jealousy, started interacting with the newcomer, sniffing him and occasionally licking his ears as if cleaning him. "Look at that. Max is adopting you too," said Will, smiling as he noticed the change in his loyal companion's behavior. In the afternoon, as he fed the puppy again, Will heard the sound of a car approaching. Max immediately perked up, running to the porch with the fur on his neck bristling. "Who could that be now?" murmured Will, leaving Brave comfortably settled and heading to the front of the house. The approaching footsteps were different from Michael Newman's. They were lighter, hesitant, as if the person was unsure of their welcome. "Good afternoon," a woman's voice called. "Mr. William Thompson?" Yes, that's me," replied Will, tilting his head as he did when trying to better catch the sounds and scents around him. "My name is Caroline Miller. I'm a social worker and researcher. I'm documenting traditional ways of life in rural Colorado for a university project. I'd love to speak with you if you have a moment." The voice was soft, with an accent that didn't belong to the mountains of Colorado. There was sincerity in it, something Will rarely encountered in strangers. "Of course, Miss Caroline, please come in." Max, initially wary, approached to sniff the visitor. After a few seconds of canine assessment, he apparently approved of Caroline's presence as he calmly returned inside the house where Brave was waiting. "Your dog is beautiful," Caroline remarked, and he seems very well trained. Max is more than a dog. He's my best friend, Will replied, guiding her inside. And now we have a new member of the family, Brave. Caroline observed the puppy lying near the stove and immediately understood the situation. Was he abandoned? Poor thing. Her voice carried genuine compassion. I found him this morning near the fence. Someone left him there too. Well, you know. Will couldn't finish the sentence, the indignation clear in his voice. Caroline knelt beside the puppy, examining him carefully. He seems to be responding well to your care. You must have a lot of experience with animals. Actually, I have experience taking care of those in need, Will answered with a smile, whether animal, plant, or person. As he prepared coffee for his guest, Will felt a strange sense of comfort in Caroline's presence. There was something about her that inspired trust, as if she truly cared about what he had to say about his way of life. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the simple kitchen of Hope Ranch. Will poured 2 cups, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of his space. Caroline watched his precise movements attentively, admiring the ease of this man who, despite being blind, showed such independence. So you're documenting traditional ways of life. Why are you interested in my case? Asked Will, sitting down on the time-worn wooden chair. Caroline pulled a small recorder from her pocket. Do you mind if I record our conversation? It's to make sure I don't miss any important details. Go. Right ahead, he replied, nodding. Well, I'm particularly interested in people who keep traditional crafts alive, especially in times when everything is industrialized, Caroline explained, turning on the recorder. Your cheese, for example, is famous in the region. Everyone talks about how different it is, how it has a flavor that factory-made products can't replicate. Will smiled, genuinely pleased by the recognition. It's because every cheese carries a bit of the soul of the person who makes it, Miss Caroline. The hands feel the right moment, the heart knows when it's ready. For the next 40 minutes, Will explained the process of making his cheese, from milking the cows to the exact aging time. Caroline asked thoughtful questions, showing a sincere interest that went beyond mere academic research. Were you born here on the ranch? She asked after a sip of coffee. Yes, born and raised here. My father and grandfather too. Hope Ranch has been in the family for 3 generations, Will replied. Clear pride in his voice. I lost my sight at 7, but that never stopped me from loving and caring for this place. And how did you learn to do all this? It must have been quite a challenge. Will chuckled softly, as if recalling distant memories. It was my grandfather who taught me most of it. He used to say that the eyes sometimes deceive us, but the hands and heart never do. He taught me to feel the earth, to recognize a healthy plant by touch, to know the exact moment the cheese is ready by smell and texture. Max, who had been lying near Brave, came over and rested his head on Will's lap, as if wanting to join the conversation. Caroline couldn't help but notice the deep bond between the two. And Max, how long has he been with you? Max showed up here 5 years ago. He was thin, hurt, clearly mistreated. Someone abandoned him on the road, probably because he wasn't a cute little puppy anymore, Will said, stroking the dog's ears. We understood each other right away. He needed a home, I needed companionship and protection. It was a fair trade. Caroline smiled, touched by the story. There was something about Will's simplicity and honesty that deeply captivated her. Mr. Thompson, I've heard there are companies interested in buying land in this area. Have you been approached? Will's expression changed immediately. His shoulders tensed and Max seemed to pick up on the shift, lifting his head alert. Yes, I had a visit a few days ago. A man named Michael Newman, representing some kind of venture. And what exactly did he want? To buy my land. Offered a price he called irresistible, Will replied, bitterness in his voice, as if Hope Ranch could be reduced to numbers. Caroline jotted down a few quick notes in her notebook. And you refused, of course. Damn right I did. This land isn't for sale, not for all the money in the world. A look of concern crossed Caroline's face, something Will couldn't see, but somehow sensed in the subtle shift of her breathing. You should know. I've been hearing troubling stories about this Newman and the company he represents, she said hesitantly. It seems they've been acquiring properties all over the region, sometimes using questionable methods. Will leaned forward suddenly, interested. What kind of methods? Pressure, intimidation, some even say sabotage. Caroline paused, as if weighing whether to continue. But they're just rumors, nothing proven. Well, something's happening around here, Will confirmed. Tools disappearing, fences damaged, strange footprints on the property. And now Brave abandoned right on the edge of my land. Max barked once, as if agreeing with his owner's assessment. You think there might be a connection? That maybe the puppy... I can't say for sure, Will interrupted. But there have been a lot of coincidences since Newman's visit, and Max has been more alert than usual, growling at the road, even when there's no noticeable sound. Caroline fell silent for a moment, absorbing the information. Finally, she made a decision. Mr. Thompson, aside from academic research, I work with an NGO that defends small farmers against predatory land speculation. With your permission, I'd like to document not just your traditional techniques, but also this situation you're facing. Will considered the offer. It wasn't in his nature to trust strangers easily, especially in times like these. But something about Caroline, maybe the sincerity in her voice, maybe the fact that Max had accepted her without hesitation, made him want to believe her. And how would this documentation help me? Evidence, Mr. Thompson. If something really is going on, we need proof. I can photograph the damage, record statements from other farmers in the area, maybe even catch suspicious activity, Caroline explained, her enthusiasm growing. Public exposure is often the best protection against these kinds of practices. Max, as if understanding the conversation, walked over to Caroline and placed his paw on her knee, a gesture Will knew well. It was his sign of approval. Looks like Max has already decided for me, Will laughed. If he trusts you, then I do too. Caroline's smile lit up her face, though Will couldn't see it. Still, he felt the shift in the room's energy, as if a ray of hope slipped through the cracks of the old windows. You won't regret this, Mr. Thompson. I promise to do everything I can to help you protect Hope Ranch. At that moment, as the afternoon sun began to set behind the mountains of Colorado, an unlikely alliance was forming in Will's small kitchen, an alliance that would prove crucial for the events yet to come. If this story has caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from. Let's continue. 2 weeks had passed since Caroline's first visit to Hope Ranch. During that time, she returned nearly every day, meticulously documenting Will's routine, photographing the cheese-making process, and recording the traditional knowledge he kept alive. Her presence brought a new energy to the property, and even Max seemed livelier, always greeting her with cheerful barks. Brave, meanwhile, was recovering quickly under Will's attentive care. The pup could already walk more steadily, and his appetite grew by the day. Max had taken on an almost fatherly role, teaching the little one how to behave and protecting him during their backyard explorations. On that sunny Sunday morning, Caroline arrived earlier than usual. She carried an air of concern that Will, though unable to see, noticed immediately by the urgency in her knock, sharper than normal. "Good morning, Caroline. Is something wrong?" he asked as soon as he opened the door. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she replied, stepping inside quickly. "I've uncovered some things we need to discuss urgently." Max and Brave approached to greet her, but even the dogs seemed to sense the tension in the air. Caroline set her bag on the kitchen table and pulled out a laptop. "I've spent the last few days investigating Michael Newman's company," she explained, opening the computer. "New Horizon Ventures, and what I found is concerning." Will sat down, offering Caroline coffee, which she declined with a quick wave, too restless to pause her explanation. "They're not just interested in ordinary real estate speculation," she continued. "There's something more valuable in this region, something beneath the ground." "What are you talking about, Caroline?" "Water, Will, pure mineral water of the highest quality." A geological study conducted 2 years ago, which I managed to access through a university contact, indicates the existence of a massive underground aquifer that stretches across this entire mountainous area. Will furrowed his brow, processing the information. His calloused hands tightened around the coffee cup. And my ranch is located right over one of the main access points to that aquifer, Caroline finished. The study shows the water here is exceptionally pure, naturally filtered by rock formations, a real gold mine for the mineral water industry. Max approached, sensing his owner's unease, and rested his head on Will's knee, as he always did when Will was troubled. So it's not just about the land, Will murmured. It's about what's beneath it. Exactly. And about your property's strategic location. Hope Ranch is at the highest point, which would make gravity-fed extraction easier, reducing operational costs. Will stood and walked to the window, feeling the morning sun on his face. His entire life he had lived off that land, respecting it, caring for it. He'd never imagined it held such a valuable treasure within its depths. What else did you find out about this Newman? Caroline sighed, closing her laptop. He's not the owner of the company, just a representative. New Horizon belongs to a larger group, headquartered in Chicago with a history of questionable practices in other parts of the country. They buy land at low prices, often pressuring owners with intimidation tactics, then exploit natural resources with no regard for environmental or social impact. Like those stories you mentioned about questionable methods. Yes, and I have more, added Caroline, pulling some photographs from her bag. Yesterday afternoon, after I left here, I kept watching the road that leads to your property. I captured images of 2 men lurking around the boundaries of Hope Ranch. One of them was Newman's assistant, Richard. Will reached out his hand as if he wanted to touch the photographs. An instinctive gesture, even though he knew he couldn't see them. What were they doing? It looked like some kind of reconnaissance. They were taking measurements, making notes. At one point, I managed to photograph them collecting soil samples near the creek that runs through your property. Will felt a wave of indignation rise in his chest. The idea of strangers trespassing on his land, collecting samples without permission, was deeply unsettling. And that's not all, Caroline continued hesitantly. I found evidence that they might be behind the incidents you've been facing, the missing tools, the damage to the fence. And Brave, do you think they... I can't say for sure, Caroline replied quickly, but it's a possibility. Intimidation is a common tactic in this kind of business. Max suddenly barked, heading toward the front door. Brave, mimicking the older dog, joined in with his high-pitched puppy barks. Someone's coming, said Will, standing up. Caroline rushed to the window and peeked through the curtain. It's your neighbor's tractor, Mr. Anthony, she reported, relieved. Anthony was the only remaining neighbor who hadn't sold his property yet. An old, stubborn man who, like Will, resisted New Horizons' offers. Max's barks faded as he recognized the familiar visitor. Will headed toward the porch, guided by the sound of the approaching engine. "Good morning, Will," shouted Anthony, turning off the tractor engine. His voice trembled slightly, unusual for the usually confident old farmer. "Anthony, what's wrong? You seem upset," replied Will. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent," said Anthony, climbing down from the tractor with difficulty. "Oh, good. Morning, miss," he added, noticing Caroline. "Good morning, Mr. Anthony. I'm Caroline Miller. The researcher, yes, I've heard of you. Good that you're here too. What I have to say concerns both of you." Entering the house and accepting the coffee offered by Will, Anthony finally revealed the reason for his visit. "Someone tried to sabotage my well last night. I woke up to Max, my dog, not yours, barking like crazy. When I went out to see what was happening, I caught 2 men tampering with the water pump. They ran when they saw me, but I'm sure they were the same men who came offering me money for my land last week." Caroline and Will exchanged meaningful glances, or rather, Caroline looked at Will, who tilted his head toward her, sensing her reaction from her changed breathing. "And there's more," Anthony continued, his voice now lower, almost conspiratorial. "Before you arrived, miss, the other neighbors who've already sold their land told me they found out the real reason New Horizon is interested. It's not to build a luxury housing development, like they initially claimed. It's because of the water. They say there's an underground mineral water reserve of the highest quality beneath our land. We just discovered that too, Caroline confirmed, and Will's ranch is located at the prime spot for extraction. The three fell silent. For a moment, each absorbing the implications of that discovery. Max and Brave, sensing the tension, remained alert, watching every movement. Anthony's revelation confirmed the suspicions already looming over Hope Ranch. After the neighbor left, promising to stay vigilant and in constant contact, Will and Caroline spent the rest of that Sunday strategizing ways to protect the property. "We need concrete evidence," insisted Caroline as she organized the photos she had taken. "Something we can use legally against New Horizon." Will agreed, though he felt the situation was escalating quickly. The vulnerability of being watched on his own land was unsettling for someone who had always lived in harmony with his surroundings. "Max has been more restless lately," he remarked, stroking the dog that never left his side. "He senses when something's off." Caroline looked at the animal, noting his protective behavior. Max did seem more alert these past few days, as if anticipating an imminent threat. Brave, meanwhile, followed the older dog's lead, mirroring his watchful stance. "I'll install some surveillance cameras at key points around the property," Caroline proposed. "I have enough equipment in my car. They're discreet, battery-powered, and send footage straight to my phone." "Do you think they'll come back?" asked Will. "I'm sure of it. And when they do, we'll be ready." The next morning brought a steady, light rain, typical of autumn in the Colorado mountains. Will woke to the sound of droplets on the tin roof, a familiar rhythm that usually soothed him. That day, however, unease lingered. After breakfast, he headed to the barn to check the tractor. He needed to plow part of the field for the new planting, and the gentle rain was perfect for softening the soil. Max and Brave followed him as always. When he reached the barn, Will immediately sensed something was wrong. The smell was off. There was a stronger scent of fuel than usual. Approaching the tractor carefully, his experienced fingers traced the machinery, trying to figure out what had changed. "It can't be," he murmured, realizing the fuel hoses had been cut and several engine components were either damaged or simply missing. Max began barking furiously, running back and forth across the barn, as if searching for whoever was responsible for the act. Brave, still inexperienced but following the older dog's lead, joined in the barking. Will sat down on a nearby stool, feeling the weight of the discovery. The tractor was essential for running the ranch. Without it, many tasks would become nearly impossible for a blind man working practically alone. That was the last straw, he said to himself, determination swelling in his chest. "I won't let them intimidate me like this." At that moment, he heard the sound of Caroline's car arriving. She had promised to return early to install the cameras. Will stood up and walked toward the barn entrance, calling out to her as soon as he heard her footsteps approaching. "Caroline, come see this. They sabotaged my tractor." She rushed into the barn, breathless. "My God, Mr. Will. This is serious, very serious." Caroline examined the damage, photographing every detail with her phone. The vandalism was obvious: clean cuts on the hoses, parts removed with precision. This wasn't the work of amateurs. "This wasn't some impulsive act," she remarked. "It was planned and carried out by someone who knew exactly what they were doing." "What now? How am I supposed to work without the tractor?" Caroline thought for a moment, weighing their options. "I'll call a mechanic I know in Pleasant Valley. He's trustworthy and can come today. In the meantime, let's install the cameras right away. We can't let this happen again." In the following hours, Caroline strategically installed 6 small cameras around the property, covering key access points and vulnerable areas. She explained to Will how the system worked, even though he couldn't see the images. "If anyone enters the property, I'll get an alert on my phone. The cameras have night vision and are very discreet." The mechanic arrived in the early afternoon, brought by Caroline. He was a middle-aged man with a strong rural accent and hands calloused from hard labor. His name was Gerald, and apparently he already knew Caroline from years past. "It's outrageous what they did to your tractor, Mr. Will," Gerald remarked after inspecting the damage. "This wasn't an accident or normal wear and tear. Someone meant to harm you." Can you fix it? Will asked anxiously. I can, but I'll need some parts I don't have here. I can come back tomorrow with everything I need. Until then, I recommend you keep an eye out. Whoever did this might return. After Gerald left, promising to return the next morning, Will and Caroline sat on the porch. The rain had stopped, leaving, behind that distinctive scent of wet earth, Max and Brave were lying at Will's feet, seemingly calmer now. I think we should go to the police, Caroline suggested. This is clearly sabotage, an attempt at intimidation. Will shook his head, skeptically. And what are we going to say? That we suspect a big company is behind this? Without concrete proof, they won't take us seriously. We have the photos I took of the men lurking around your property, and now the evidence of the tractor sabotage. It's still not enough, insisted Will. Companies like New Horizon have powerful lawyers. We need something more solid. Caroline sighed, recognizing the wisdom in the rancher's words. Then, an idea began to form in her mind. What if we confronted Michael Newman directly? Not to accuse him, but to see his reaction when we mention what we've discovered about the aquifer. Will considered the proposal for a few moments, absent-mindedly stroking Max's ears. It would be risky. We might show our hand too soon. Or we could catch him off guard, argued Caroline. If we discreetly record the conversation, maybe we can get a confession or slip-up from him. As they debated strategies, Caroline's phone emitted an alert sound. She quickly grabbed it, checking the notification. One of the cameras detected movement, she informed, opening the app to view the live feed. It's on the western border of the property near the creek. Will tensed immediately. Max, sensing the shift in his owner's posture, stood up, alert. Who is it? Can you see? Caroline zoomed in on the screen, trying to identify the figure, moving among the trees. It's a man. Looks like he's collecting something. Wait, I recognize him. It's Richard, Newman's assistant. He's collecting water samples from the creek. That's trespassing, exclaimed Will, standing up. He has no right to enter my land without permission. Caroline also stood up, determined. I'm going to confront him. I'll take more photos as evidence. Don't go alone, warned Will. Max, we'll go with you. He knows the way to the creek. Without wasting time, Caroline grabbed her professional camera and, accompanied by Max, quickly headed toward the western boundary. Will stayed on the porch with Brave, anxious, alert to any sound that might signal trouble. The minutes dragged like hours as Will waited on the porch, listening for any noise from the direction of the creek. Brave, sensing the man's tension, stayed restless by his side, occasionally letting out small whimpers as if trying to communicate his own concern. The distant sound of barking made Will jump to his feet. It was Max's unmistakable bark, but not his usual alert tone. There was urgency in it, almost desperation. Something's wrong, he murmured to himself, feeling his heart race. Without a second thought, Will grabbed his special cane, made of sturdy wood, and began walking quickly toward the barking. Despite his blindness, he knew the path to the creek like the back of his hand. Every rock, every root, every dip in the terrain was mapped in his memory. Brave followed at his side, nervous but determined to stay with his new protector. The Cho pup, though still recovering, showed touching loyalty. As he neared the creek, the sounds became clearer. Max's barks, raised voices, one of which he immediately recognized as Caroline's. The other, a man's voice, aggressive, likely belonged to Richard. How dare you accuse me? I'm just collecting samples for an official environmental study, said the male voice, laced with false indignation. On private property without permission? That's trespassing, and I have it all photographed. Caroline shot back, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. Max kept barking, positioned between Caroline and Richard, clearly protecting the woman he now considered part of his family. Will emerged from the trail leading to the creek, guided by the sound of the voices. What's going on here? He asked with authority, startling the two. Will, exclaimed Caroline, relief evident in her voice. I caught Mr. Richard collecting water samples from your creek without permission. He refuses to admit he's trespassing on your property. Max ran to Will's side, growling at Richard. Brave, trying to mimic the older dog, but with less authority, joined in the growling. Mr. Thompson, said Richard, trying to maintain his composure. "There's a misunderstanding here. I'm conducting an environmental study authorized by the state's Department of Environmental Protection. Your assistant is accusing me unfairly." "That's a lie," interrupted Caroline. "I called the department just yesterday. There's no authorized study in this area. And I have photos of you collecting samples without permission, plus the security camera footage." Will took a step forward, leaning firmly on his cane. "Mr. Richard, this is private property. You're trespassing without authorization, and I suspect this isn't the first time." "I don't know what you're talking about," replied Richard, but his voice trembled slightly. "The damage to my tractor, the missing tools, the marks on the fence, that was you, wasn't it? Or someone following your orders?" Richard let out a nervous laugh. "Now you're accusing me of vandalism? That's absurd. I have nothing to do with those incidents." "What about the abandoned puppy?" Will continued, his voice now heavy with restrained anger. "Was it a coincidence to find you right at the border of my property after I refused Michael Newman's proposal?" A tense silence settled in. Max continued to growl, sensing the rising hostility in the air. Caroline, realizing the situation could escalate dangerously, decided to intervene. "We have enough evidence for a formal complaint, Mr. Richard. Trespassing, unauthorized collection of natural resources, and we strongly suspect sabotage. I suggest you leave immediately." Richard looked from Caroline to Will, weighing his options. Finally, he began gathering his equipment. "This isn't over," he threatened in a low voice. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "On the contrary," Will replied calmly, "we know exactly who we're dealing with, and that's why we're prepared." Richard walked away, casting one last threatening glance before disappearing down the trail leading to the main road. Caroline rushed to Will's side, checking if he was all right. "Did you manage to photograph everything?" he asked. "Yes, and I even recorded part of the conversation on my phone. We have solid proof now." Will nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "This will provoke them. We need to be even more vigilant." As they walked back to the house, Caroline explained in detail what she had witnessed. Richard wasn't just collecting water samples, but also soil samples, and he was taking notes on a tablet. She had managed to quickly photograph the screen, capturing what appeared to be a preliminary analysis of the water's composition. "They're testing the quality and volume," Caroline concluded, confirming the aquifer's potential before making their final move. Back on the porch, sitting as Max and Brave rested at their feet, Will and Caroline discussed their next steps. "We should go to the police first thing tomorrow," Caroline insisted. "With the evidence we have now, they'll have to open an investigation." "And what if that's not enough?" questioned Will. "Companies like New Horizon have influence even over local authorities." Caroline stayed silent for a moment, recognizing the truth in his words. "Then we need more allies," she finally said. "Mr. Anthony is already on our side. What about the other neighbors who sold their land? Maybe if they find out they were deceived about the real purpose of the purchase, they might help us." "I doubt they'll want to get involved," replied Will, skeptical. "They already got their money and moved on." "What about the press? I have contacts at the regional newspaper. A story about a big company using intimidation tactics against a blind traditional farmer would be pretty impactful." Will considered the idea. He disliked exposure, always preferring the quiet of his simple routine, but he understood that in extreme situations, new strategies were necessary. "We can try," he finally agreed. "But first I want to confront Michael Newman directly. I want to look him in the eye, figuratively speaking, and make it clear I won't give up my land." "That would be risky," Caroline warned. "After the confrontation with Richard, they'll be on the defensive." "That's exactly why it's the perfect moment. They won't expect a direct attack from us." As they debated the best approach, Will's phone rang, an old ringtone, rarely used. Very few people had that number. "Hello? Will? It's Michael Newman." The voice on the other end of the line sounded forcibly cordial. "I'd like to reschedule our conversation about the proposal to buy your property. I have a new offer that I believe will interest you greatly." Caroline, who was closely watching William's expression, noticed the tension that took over his face. "Mr. Newman, what a coincidence. I was just thinking about reaching out to you. William's voice was controlled, revealing none of the inner turmoil he felt. When can we meet? How about tomorrow morning? I can come to your ranch if you prefer. That would be perfect, William replied. I'll be waiting. As he hung up the phone, a determined smile formed on his lips. It seems we won't need to look for him. Newman is coming to us tomorrow. Caroline looked at William with concern. Are you sure about this? He must be furious about what happened today. That's exactly why this is our opportunity. Let's prepare a proper welcome for Mr. Newman, one he'll never forget. The rest of the afternoon was spent carefully crafting a plan for the next day's confrontation. Caroline checked all the cameras, making sure they were working perfectly. William, in turn, reached out to his friend Anthony, inviting him to be present at the meeting. One more witness, one more ally. That night, sitting in his chair on the porch with Max and Brave asleep at his feet, William reflected on recent events. Hope Ranch, his refuge, his home, the place where he had grown up and learned to live despite his blindness, was now at the center of a dispute that went far beyond his initial understanding. Let them come, he murmured into the darkness he couldn't see but felt all around him. This land has its own defenses. The dawn brought with it a mist characteristic of the mountains of Colorado, enveloping Hope Ranch in a white, ethereal shroud. Will woke before sunrise, as was his habit, but that day there was a different tension in his movements. Max, always attuned to his owner's mood, stayed unusually close, while Brave, still learning the rhythms of the ranch, watched everything with growing curiosity. Caroline had arrived in the dim light of early morning, bringing additional equipment, a high-precision recorder and a small camera that could be easily hidden. Anthony arrived soon after, bringing an unexpected ally in his old Jeep. Sophia, a woman nearly 80 years old, a former midwife of the region, and respected by all as the guardian of local memory. Sophia insisted on coming when she heard about the matter, Anthony explained, helping the elderly woman down from the vehicle. She said she has something important to reveal. Will smiled, extending his hands to the woman approaching with slow but steady steps. Though he couldn't see her, he immediately recognized the scent of herbs that always accompanied Sophia, a mix of rosemary, rue, and sage that she grew in her own backyard. Sophia, what an honor to welcome you into my home, Will said, genuinely pleased by her presence. The pleasure is mine, my son, the elderly woman replied, clasping Will's calloused hands between her own, equally marked by a lifetime of labor. I came because the land called to me, and because there's something you all need to know. In the simple kitchen of the house, as Caroline prepared coffee for everyone, Sophia began to tell a story that left the group in complete silence. This land we stand on holds an ancient secret, one the elders always knew, but few spoke of openly. Beneath these mountains flows the purest water that ever existed. The ancients called it the water of life because they said those who drank it gained health and longevity. Will leaned forward, intrigued. He knew many of the local legends his grandfather had told him, but this one was new to him. When I was young, Sophia continued, there was a man who came from far away, a geologist. He spent months studying these lands, taking measurements, collecting samples. He confirmed what the elders already knew. There's an immense aquifer beneath us, but it's no ordinary aquifer. The rock formation of these mountains filters the water in a unique way, enriching it with rare minerals. Caroline, listening intently, quickly connected this information to her own discoveries. That's why New Horizon is so interested in this area, she concluded. It's not just ordinary mineral water. It's something far more valuable. Exactly, my dear, Sophia confirmed, but there's more. The spot where this water is most accessible, where it comes closest to the surface. It's here at Hope Ranch, Will finished, finally understanding the true scale of the situation. Yes, your grandfather knew this, Will. That's why he never allowed anyone to drill deep wells here. He said some things in nature must remain untouched. A respectful silence followed the elderly woman's words. Max, as if sensing the importance of the moment, rested his snout on Will's knee, offering silent comfort. The sound of an approaching car broke the moment of reflection. Caroline rushed to the window. It's him. Michael Newman, and he didn't come alone. Will stood up, straightening the simple shirt he wore. Everyone knows what to do? Anthony, Caroline, and Mrs. Sophia nodded. The plan was set. It was time for the final confrontation. Newman parked his imported car in front of the house, accompanied by Richard and a third man no one recognized, tall, in an impeccable suit, with a stern expression. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," Newman greeted as he stepped onto the porch, his false courtesy barely masking the tension in his voice. "I see you have company today." "Friends and neighbors, Mr. Newman. People who, like me, value this land." Max positioned himself beside Will, watchful as always. Brave, imitating the older dog, stayed close, his sharp eyes fixed on the visitors. "This is Dr. Robert Myers, attorney for New Horizon," Newman introduced, gesturing to the unfamiliar man. "He's here to formalize our new offer, which I believe is extremely generous." Caroline had discreetly placed the recorder under the table while her small camera, hidden in a flower pot, captured the entire scene. "Before any proposal, Mr. Newman, I'd like to clarify a few things," said Will with surprising calm. "For example, why such interest in my small property? And why was your assistant collecting water and soil samples yesterday without my permission?" Newman shot an irritated glance at Richard, who averted his eyes, uncomfortable. "There was a misunderstanding about that," Newman replied, trying to maintain control of the situation. "Richard was only conducting a preliminary assessment of the area for our sustainable development proposal." "Sustainable development?" interrupted Caroline, unable to contain her outrage. "Is that what you call the intensive exploitation of a rare natural aquifer?" The lawyer quickly intervened. "Miss, I suggest you measure your words. Baseless accusations can have serious legal consequences." "They're not baseless," countered Anthony, placing an envelope on the table. "These are official reports we obtained about Novo Horizonte's real plans for this region. Plans that were never disclosed to the landowners who already sold their properties." Mrs. Sophia, who had been silently observing until then, stood up with the dignity only the very elderly can muster. "I've lived over 80 years in these mountains, Mr. Newman. I've seen many like you come with grand promises and leave behind nothing but destruction, but this time it'll be different." Newman, visibly annoyed by the turn of the conversation, dropped his facade of politeness. "Look, we're not here for a debate on environmental preservation. We're offering well above market value for this land. If you're not interested, there are other ways to get what we want." "Are you threatening us, Mr. Newman?" asked Will, raising an eyebrow. "Interpret it however you like, but know that Novo Horizonte has ways of acquiring this land, with or without your cooperation." It was then that Caroline made her move. Like through sabotage, intimidation, animal abandonment, she placed on the table the photos she had taken of Richard trespassing on the property, the evidence of the tractor sabotage, and the footage from the security cameras. "We have proof of all the illegal actions you've taken to force Mr. Thompson to sell." The lawyer, realizing the gravity of the situation, gestured for Newman to stay quiet, but it was too late. "You think these photos prove anything?" Newman sneered. "A big company like ours against a blind man and an amateur researcher? Don't make me laugh." Max growled softly, as if understanding the insult directed at his owner. Will, however, remained calm. "It's interesting you'd mention my condition, Mr. Newman. All my life, people have underestimated my abilities because of it. But you know what I've learned? That when you can't see with your eyes, other senses sharpen. I started noticing things most people overlook." "Like what?" asked the lawyer, intrigued despite himself. "Like the fact that your company isn't really interested in sustainable development, but in the intensive exploitation of a rare natural resource. Like the fact that you've been systematically sabotaging my property since I refused your first offer. And like the fact that you have no idea what this land truly holds." At that moment, Caroline discreetly activated her phone, projecting onto the wall the results of the water analyses she had accessed through her university contacts. The numbers were staggering, purity levels and mineral composition far exceeding the standards for premium water on the global market. "This is the real reason for your interest, isn't it?" Will continued. "It's not just ordinary mineral, water. It's something far more valuable. Something that could be worth billions to whoever exploits it commercially. Newman and the lawyer exchanged nervous glances, clearly surprised by the level of information Will possessed. And the most interesting part, added Caroline, is that we discovered the State Water Resources Department never authorized any study or exploration in this area. In fact, there's an ongoing process to declare this aquifer a permanent preservation area due to its rarity and ecological importance. It was at that moment the door opened, revealing two more people. A middle-aged man wearing the environmental police uniform and a young woman who immediately pulled out a press badge. "I think I arrived just in time," said the reporter, Marianne Smith from the regional newspaper, a friend of Caroline's who had been contacted the night before. "I'm working on a story about illegal attempts to appropriate natural resources in protected areas. Seems like I've found the perfect case." The environmental police officer, Sergeant Mendez, stepped forward. "Mr. Michael Newman, we have a warrant to seize all documents and equipment related to New Horizons activities in this region. There are suspicions of environmental crimes and falsified operational permits." Newman's face twisted into a mask of contained fury. He glared at Will with palpable hatred. "This isn't over," he threatened in a low voice. "On the contrary, Mr. Newman," Will replied calmly. "This ends here and now. This land is not for sale. Never was, never will be." In the hours that followed, Hope Ranch became the epicenter of intense activity. The environmental police, accompanied by technicians from the State Environmental Department, collected official water and soil samples. Marianne Smith interviewed everyone involved, assembling a story that promised national repercussions. Newman, Richard, and the lawyer were escorted off the property, facing the prospect of a lengthy legal battle over environmental crimes and attempted intimidation. By dusk, with the ranch finally peaceful again, Will, Caroline, Anthony, and Mrs. Eleanor sat on the porch, reflecting on the victory they had achieved together. "We can't let our guard down," warned Caroline, ever practical. "Companies like New Horizon have the resources to drag out legal battles for years." "But now we're not alone anymore," Will replied, smiling as he petted Max and Brave lying at his feet. "We have allies. We have the truth on our side, and, most importantly, we have this land that has endured for generations." Mrs. Eleanor, with the wisdom of her many years, nodded. "The water flowing beneath our feet was here long before us and will remain long after we're gone. Our duty is to protect it, not exploit it to exhaustion." Caroline, watching the sun set behind the mountains, felt an inexplicable emotion welling up in her chest. She had arrived at that ranch as a researcher, aiming to document a fading way of life. Instead, she had become part of something much bigger, a battle to preserve not just traditions, but nature itself. "You know, Will," she said, breaking the contemplative silence that had settled between them, "when I started my research on traditional ways of life, I never imagined I'd find not just a subject, but a cause." Will smiled, his weathered face lit by the last rays of sunlight. "And I never imagined my little ranch would become the center of such an important fight. But maybe that's why my grandfather named it Hope, because as long as there are people willing to fight for what's right, there's hope for the future." Max suddenly stood up, walking to the edge of the porch and barking once, as if greeting the horizon. Brave, now stronger and more confident, joined the older dog, both gazing at the distant mountains. "They can feel it," said Mrs. Sophia, watching the two dogs. "Animals always know when something important has happened." And indeed, something important had happened. Hope Ranch, which for generations had been just a small dot in the mountains of Colorado, had become a symbol of resistance and preservation, a reminder that some things, the land, the water, the traditions passed down through generations, are priceless and cannot be bargained away. As the first stars began to dot the sky, Will took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of his land. He couldn't see the mountains, the starry sky, or the lush greenery surrounding his property, but he could feel it all in every fiber of his being. And he knew with unshakable certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be, at home on Hope Ranch, with loyal friends by his side, and a future that, despite the challenges ahead, seemed brighter than ever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from.